The manager's voice rang out, cold and firm, in the middle of the crowded store. "If you don't have enough money, please don't come back here again." The entire space seemed to freeze. An old man in a frayed coat, holding only a loaf of bread and a small carton of milk, quietly bowed his head. He said nothing, no excuses, just bowed his head, as if he were truly at fault for being hungry while short a few coins. Just then, another voice rang out, deep but warm, firm yet full of empathy. "I'll cover the rest. If you're still short next time, I'll cover it then too." Everyone fell silent. Even the man stocking water coolers behind the counter paused. He didn't turn his head, didn't step forward, just stood still. His eyes suddenly lit up with an emotion he couldn't yet name himself. No one knew who he was. They thought he was just a new stockroom employee. But in reality, he was Grayson Hale, the founder and CEO of the supermarket chain Maple & Company. System with over 80 stores across the United States. And 3 days after that moment, one person would lose their job, another would be promoted. The entire system would change forever. Grayson had started his company with just an old truck, a few makeshift shelves, and a handwritten sign reading, "Fresh every day," hanging outside a small shop in the suburbs of Minneapolis. Back then, he would personally make coffee, wrap sandwiches for customers on cold winter days, and sometimes give them away for free if he saw someone shivering on the street without any money. But now, after 2 decades of expansion and 100 meetings a week, Grayson felt lost in the very company he had built. Everything had been reduced to reports, data, and growth charts. He began to ask himself a question that kept him up at night. My employees, do they still remember why this company was once different? No chart could measure kindness. No survey could reveal the true emotions behind the eyes of a customer or an employee. And so, Grayson decided he would return to the stores, not as a CEO, but as a new trainee, a guy named Dean with a grown-out beard, an old baseball cap, faded jeans, and scuffed sneakers. No one recognized him. And the first thing he heard upon entering Maple & Company, branch number 17, was that cold remark to the old man. But the second thing was what made Grayson stand frozen for a full minute afterward. A young cashier, with a gentle smile and tired eyes that still held a spark, had stepped up to pay for the customer without any prompting. No showing off. No live streaming, without caring if anyone was watching or not. Grayson had come here to observe, but in that very moment, he understood he was about to step into a story that he himself could never have anticipated. And if you've ever had to borrow loose change to afford a meal, you will understand why this story could change an entire company. Grayson Hale had never liked being called CEO. He preferred the word founder, because it was true he didn't have an MBA, didn't inherit a fortune, and had no shareholders backing him. He was just a guy from a working-class background in Minnesota who had delivered newspapers, worked the night shift in a cold storage warehouse, and slept in his truck for 3 straight months to save up for his first rental space. To him, what made Maple & Co. wasn't the products, but the way people were treated. During the first year the store was open, Grayson had personally brought a glass of water to an old woman who had just fainted. He was also the one who made a delivery in the middle of the night because a customer had no transportation. Back then, he used to tell his first employees, "We don't sell goods, we serve people in need." But 20 years had passed. The supermarket chain had grown from a small spot in the suburbs to locations all across the northern states. The company headquarters was located in a 25-story glass building in downtown Minneapolis. Every week, Grayson had to attend at least 9 meetings. Every month, he received 3 performance review reports from the executive board. Gradually, all he saw were numbers: third-quarter revenue growth, customer return rates by region, optimized labor costs. But what kept him awake at night were the real people who had vanished from those reports. One day, after a strategy meeting with the director of operations, he put down his pen, leaned back in his chair, and whispered, "Do we know the name of any employee at store number 17? No one in the room answered. And that was when he knew he needed to go back, not through an email, but with his own eyes and ears. 3 days later, he left his house at 5 a.m. His beard had been growing for 3 weeks. His second-hand outfit consisted of an old hoodie, a dark t-shirt, jeans with a ripped knee, and sneakers with frayed edges. He put his Rolex watch in a safe, replacing it with a scratched-face Casio he'd bought at a flea market. CEO Grayson Hale was gone. There was only Dean, a man looking for a temporary job at store number 17. As he walked through the automatic doors, the smell of freshly baked pastries and floor cleaner hit him like the scent of his youth. Inside, no one gave him a second glance. They just thought another ordinary, middle-aged guy here to stock shelves. And in that invisibility, he began to see what he had never seen from the 25th floor of the headquarters. At the checkout counter, a young man with light brown hair named Ryan always offered a gentle smile to every customer. "Mr. Frank, is your leg feeling better, Vicky? Is little Daisy's fever gone small?" Quiet questions, but they made people pause, look at him, and smile back. In the stockroom, the manager, Joel, a man who spoke robotically and clearly worked by the KPIs, handed Grayson a clipboard and said bluntly, "You're Dean, right, sent from headquarters. Go stock aisle 4, and don't ask a lot of questions." Grayson nodded. He said nothing. He didn't need to, because this time he hadn't come to be respected. He had come to listen, to stand on the tile floor between shelves of goods and boxes of formula and see clearly that a company's true culture doesn't lie in its logo, but in the way an employee pays for a poor person's groceries when no one asked them to. And it was from here that Grayson Hale's 3-day undercover journey began, not to find fault, but to rediscover the human values he had once believed in. Maple & Co. Branch number 17 was located on a modest street corner in the Highland Park neighborhood of St. Paul, Minnesota. It wasn't the largest branch, nor was it a testing ground for new products. But for 3 consecutive years, this store was always ranked in the top for being stable, few complaints, good transaction speed, and perhaps because it was stable, headquarters also paid it little attention. Grayson was placed on the new trainee list under the name Dean, Stock and Product Display Support. His supervisor was Joel Ramsey, The shift manager, a man around 40 with a high and tight haircut, who wore his name tag like a badge of power. Joel followed the rules, the schedule, the KPIs, but he didn't remember any employee's name unless they were late. With customers, he was always just polite enough, no more, no less. With his subordinates, he was direct. I don't have time for feelings. Grayson quickly realized this was the type of person the system loved because everything ran smoothly. But something was missing. Conversely, the person who first caught Grayson's attention wasn't the manager, but the young man at checkout counter number 2. Ryan Cooper, 25 years old, with a slender but not weary frame and a smile that wasn't big but was genuine. Every time a customer approached, he looked up and greeted them by name, not in a memorized, robotic way, but with real recognition. Standing nearby, Grayson overheard, "Hi, Mrs. Green. How's that sprained ankle from last week? Is Lily's cough better? Jenna Matt, did your car start right up today?" he said with a light laugh. There was nothing flashy about the way Ryan worked, but there was something that made people want to come back just to see him. In the back of the store, in a stockroom that smelled of cardboard and packing tape, Grayson met Bill Travers, a man in his late 60s with a white beard, always wearing a pair of old safety boots. Bill didn't talk much, but his eyes, when he looked at his colleagues, were full of quiet observation. Bill wasn't a manager. But Grayson saw many of the younger employees ask him for advice before asking anyone else. On his first day, Grayson's job was to stock the breakfast aisle bread, protein bars, shelf-stable milk. This was also the area near the checkout counters where he could watch Ryan from behind a shelf of toilet paper. He quietly observed Ryan bent down to pick up a dropped receipt for a customer without being asked. When he saw an old woman struggling to choose a type of cereal, he didn't just point, he walked with her down the entire aisle. He called the delivery driver by name like an old friend. A soft smile, a handshake, not an act. Grayson watched all of these things and began to ask himself, why would a cashier do so much without anyone taking notice? And he gradually realized something even more frightening. Perhaps the very system he had built had become so busy with optimization that it no longer had the patience to recognize that people like Ryan were the reason the store still existed. From the corner of the dry goods section, Grayson told himself, I didn't come here to hear what the reports say. I came to hear what they've been missing, and that cashier with the gentle smile was the first voice to awaken him from the soulless numbers. On the morning of his second day as dean, the trainee, Grayson chose a spot near the breakfast aisle, just far enough to not draw attention, but close enough to get a clear view of Ryan the cashier, who was still smiling gently. Just a few minutes after 8 o'clock, the automatic doors slid open. An old man entered, walking slowly, his brown coat faded, its cuffs frayed. Grayson recognized him immediately. It was Mr. Thomas, the customer who had been turned away the day before for being short on money. He walked straight to the bread section, picked up a loaf of the cheapest white bread and a tiny carton of milk. Just 2 items, enough for one meal. Grayson quietly placed his hand on a box of granola, pretending to check stock, his eyes following the man. Mr. Thomas approached the counter. Ryan recognized him at once and gave a slight nod. Hello, Mr. Thomas. "It's really cold out today, isn't it, Mr.?" Thomas didn't reply. He just gave a strained smile and fumbled in his pocket. 1, 2, 3 crumpled bills, a few coins. Grayson heard him whisper, "Lacking confidence. I thought it was enough." He lifted the carton of milk, preparing to put it back on the counter. And then, at that exact moment, Ryan gently reached out his hand, stopping him. "It's okay. You can keep both. I've got it today." Grayson froze. It wasn't about the money. It was about the way Ryan said it, without a hint of pity, without any sense of charity. He just spoke like someone who could help and was willing to, without a second thought. Mr. Thomas was flustered, almost ashamed. "I told you not to do that anymore." Ryan lowered his head, speaking softly but firmly. "Let me take care of it. If you're still short next time, I'll still help." Not a word of showing off. No look-seeking praise. No manager was standing there. No camera was rolling. There was only Grayson, the founder of this entire system, standing behind a box of granola, feeling the very foundation of his philosophy shaking. In the past 20 years, Grayson had reviewed hundreds of performance evaluations and thousands of sales charts. But he had never once seen an action like that noted in any report. An employee willing to use his own meager salary not as a one-time gesture, but as a habit. Grayson didn't react immediately. He needed to be sure. He needed to know if this was a one-time accident or a personal culture. So, he spent the entire morning near the checkout counter, pretending to arrange snacks and sports drinks. But in reality, he was observing closely. In the next 2 hours, he witnessed it 2 more times with his own eyes. A tired young woman, holding a small child, was buying a few jars of baby food and a pack of diapers. Her card was declined. Ryan said nothing. He just quietly used his own card, entered an internal code, and said, "All set. You can go." A young man in a fast food uniform was counting out coins on the counter. Ryan looked at the amount, said nothing, just gently pulled a dollar bill from his own wallet, slipped it into the cash drawer, and hit a key. "That's enough. Here's your receipt. 3 times, in 2 hours. No one asked him to. No one recognized it. No one knew." Grayson took a deep breath. A question he had never heard in any strategy meeting echoed in his mind. Who is this kid? And why? Has no one ever told me about him? A part of him wanted to intervene right away, to immediately call the regional supervisor, demand a commendation, a spot bonus. But the other part whispered, "Wait, don't ruin this genuine thing just to satisfy your ego." Grayson continued to stand there, his eyes fixed on Ryan. He realized this wasn't an isolated act. This was a way of life. And right there at that small checkout counter, beneath the simple name tag, Ryan, cashier, he found the answer to the biggest question of his life. True kindness still exists. It just doesn't speak loudly. It's quiet, just like him. Grayson returned to his temporary apartment that evening, his mind reeling. He opened his laptop, pulled up the Maple & Company system dashboard, and searched for branch number 17, St. Paul. The assessment appeared. Cold and impersonal revenue stable, complaint rate low, Operating costs standard. Personnel performance stable. Not outstanding. Not outstanding. Grayson stared at the screen. The cashier, who had just paid out of his own pocket for 3 consecutive customers, who cared for each person like family, was rated as not outstanding. Perhaps it was because Ryan didn't sell many upsell products. He didn't say, "Would you like to add a coupon?" or "If you buy 2 more bottles, you get 1 free." Ryan wasn't trying to boost sales. He was just trying to connect with people. And perhaps Grayson's system, the very thing he had painstakingly built, was ignoring those things. The next morning, Grayson returned early. Before the manager, Joel, arrived. Before the other employees had even clocked in, Ryan was already there. His uniform was neatly pressed as he carried a case of bottled water straight into the stockroom. No one was watching. No manager was nearby. No cameras were on. And yet, Ryan was, smiling just as usual. Grayson stood quietly at the end of an aisle, like a shadow, observing every movement. Ryan didn't know anyone was watching. But when he saw a young mother walk in with a sleeping baby on her shoulder, he immediately stopped what he was doing, walked to the door, and held it open for her. Later, an older man limping on a sore leg came in to buy instant noodles. Ryan smiled. "We just brewed a fresh pot of coffee. Mr. Green, have a cup. It's on the house today." The man hesitated. "Are you sure?" Ryan laughed and winked. "No coffee. No power." The man chuckled out loud. The young man behind the counter somehow made a cold morning feel warm. Grayson leaned his hand against a shelf, his heart rate slowing. The emotions inside him were complex admiration. Yes, being moved. Yes, but they were accompanied by a pain he couldn't name. How could someone like him have never been mentioned in any recognition report? Grayson began to see that the system he had once been so proud of might be wrong. In strategy meetings, regional directors always talked about performance-based talent management. Employee A is great at upselling. Employee B has the highest transaction speed. Employee C is effective at handling complaints. But who was keeping track of the people who simply did the right thing without being taught, without asking for recognition? Grayson remembered a winter afternoon 15 years ago. A poor woman with her 3 young children came into his first store. They had exactly $4.25, but their basket held bread, instant noodles, and orange juice. The card was declined. He had paid for it himself, saying simply, "It's okay, just come back next time." He used to believe that how you treated the poorest among you was the true essence of the company. And now, an employee was doing that every day and was at risk of being disciplined for improperly interfering with a transaction. Grayson's hand tightened on the edge of the shelf. Maybe the very system I created is killing the very things I used to believe in. I need to understand more, not just to see his actions, but to know why a young man like Ryan would choose to live this way when no one asked him to. A person like that cannot be seen merely as an employee. That afternoon, after the lunch rush, the store quieted down between peak hours. The familiar sounds, the beeping of scanners, the shuffle of footsteps, the chime of the automatic door seemed to fade. Grayson looked around and realized this was the perfect moment to talk, not as a CEO, but as a man, searching for something he had lost. He walked into the break room behind the stockroom, where a faint yellow light cast a glow on the white plastic tables. Ryan was sitting alone in a corner, opening a microwaved burrito, eating quietly without looking at his phone. No headphones, no TikTok. Just silence, a rare sight for a young person. Grayson pulled up a chair and sat down across from him. Ryan looked up and gave a polite nod. "Dean, have you eaten?" Grayson smiled. "I just need a little conversation." Ryan was slightly surprised, but didn't refuse. Grayson took a deep breath and asked gently, "Do you ever think about why you do it? Do what help people, pay for them, stay to clean up after your shift is over. No one makes you do that." Ryan put his burrito down and wiped his hands on his jeans. He didn't look up or answer right away. It was as if he had been preparing for a long time to one day say it out loud. "My father passed away when I was 16. Suddenly, no one was prepared. One minute he was laughing, the next he wasn't breathing." Grayson fell silent. Ryan continued, his voice even and calm, as if telling someone else's story. "We had no insurance, no savings, just a pile of bills and my little brother Adam, who was only 10 at the time." Ryan looked down at his hands, his fingernails clean. "With faint calluses, I dropped out of college in my sophomore year. I did everything night shifts in a cold storage, gas stations, supermarkets, deliveries, anything to make sure Adam could finish his education. This is the most stable job I've ever had, and I know I'm luckier than a lot of people." Grayson felt a lump form in his throat, but Ryan wasn't trembling. No regrets, no complaints, just pieces of a real life, laid down one by one, like bricks building a person. A moment of silence passed. Then Grayson asked quietly, "And how is Adam now?" for the first time in their conversation. Ryan smiled, not big, not for show, but real. "He's at Ohio State University, full scholarship for engineering, but I promised I'd cover all the other costs, books, living expenses, anything the scholarship doesn't cover." Grayson nodded slowly. "So, almost all of your salary goes to your brother?" Ryan shrugged slightly. "I live simply. Share a house with 2 friends. No travel, no shopping. As long as Adam gets the chance I never had, that's enough." Grayson said nothing for a few seconds, but then he asked the question that still troubled him. "What about those customers? The old man, the young mother, the fast food worker. Why do you help them? This time?" Ryan looked Grayson straight in the eye. His gaze was unflinching. "Nothing to hide. Because I know the feeling of having to smile while you're drowning. I've walked into a store not knowing how much money was left on my card. I've stared at a POS machine, just hoping it wouldn't get declined. And I've known what it feels like when someone treats you with kindness, not out of duty, not because they pity you, but because they choose to be a good person." Grayson gave a small nod. A nod, as if he had just understood a truth so simple, yet so profoundly painful. "You're doing what our entire system has forgotten. Ryan looked down, a slight blush on his cheeks. "I don't tell this story to anyone, not because I'm afraid. It's just that no one ever asked." Grayson stood up. Before walking out the door, he looked back. "You don't have to do anything more to be worthy. You already are." A decision was beginning to form in his mind, but before he could act, he needed to know more about this man, about what his system had missed. The next morning, Grayson didn't go to the sales floor. He didn't stack boxes of cereal or pretend to place a stock order. He went straight to the back to the stockroom, an area few people noticed, but where the real work happened. There, among stacks of bottled water, Grayson saw Bill Travers, the quiet man with the experienced eyes, moving trays of water with an old hand truck. Bill was the same as always, working slowly but surely, not saying much. But Grayson knew if anyone in this store understood Ryan best, it would be him. Grayson nodded a greeting. "Bill, need a hand." Bill didn't object. Together, they stacked cases of water, taped up boxes, and pulled pallets into place. Not many words were needed, just the sound of plastic hitting plastic and the long tear of packing tape. After about 15 minutes of silence, Grayson spoke up. "You've been here a long time, haven't you?" Bill nodded. 10 years. Since the name tags were handwritten and hung with string, Grayson smiled. "Then you must know a lot of people." Bill paused for a beat, then asked directly, "You're asking about Ryan, aren't you?" Grayson faltered slightly. How did you guess Bill set the roll of tape down, leaned his hands on a box, and looked straight at him? "Because no one ever asks about Ryan, unless there's a problem." Grayson was silent. Bill continued. His voice was even, unadorned, as if reciting an old song he knew by heart. "Ryan came here 3 years ago. He was as thin as a reed back then. His file said he could do any job, was willing to take night shifts, and didn't ask for benefits. I found it strange. He was so young, but his eyes weren't like a beginner's. They were like someone who had already been through a lot, but still chose to live gently." Grayson asked softly, "Did he ever talk about his family?" Bill nodded. "His father died young. His mother left without a word. He raised his younger brother on his own, putting him through school. No one helped, but he never used that to ask for special treatment. One time, I saw Ryan coughing his lungs out all morning. Feverish, his eyes bloodshot. I told him, 'Go home, you can work tomorrow.' He shook his head. 'Bill, you have to go home early today because your wife has dialysis, so I have to cover your shift.'" Grayson felt a tightening in his chest. "Once, Ryan fainted in the stockroom, right in that corner." Bill pointed. He just sat down on the floor, sweat pouring off him. I ran over, and all he asked for was a few sips of water. Then he got back to work like nothing happened. Grayson went still. His eyes shifted to the corner of the stockroom where Ryan had collapsed, a dark corner. No camera. Never mentioned in any report. What do we call that? Bill Grayson asked quietly. Dedication. Sacrifice. Bill looked at him for a moment before replying, "I call that disciplined kindness. The kind of kindness that doesn't need anyone to know and doesn't wait for anyone to say thank you." Grayson nodded slowly, then turned to the shift schedule on the wall. The name Ryan C. appeared every day. 12 days in a row. No days off. No absences. Not late. He pulled out his phone and quietly took a picture of the schedule, not to expose anyone, but to remind himself the most valuable people in an organization are often the quietest. Bill crossed his arms, leaning against a shelf. He looked at Grayson with knowing eyes. "You're not a temp, are you?" Grayson smiled slightly, not denying it. Bill nodded. "I figured, but I don't need to know who you are. I'm just glad that finally someone asked." And right there in the stockroom, where there were no spotlights, no performance leaderboards, Grayson found his final confirmation. Ryan wasn't just a good employee, he was the foundation the entire store was standing on. And no one knew it. That evening, Maple & Compton store number 17 closed up like any other day. The last customer walked out, the door chimes sounding softly. Employees began their closing procedures, mopping the floors, closing out the registers, counting the cash. Ryan was still at his counter, gently wiping down the monitor. His eyes were tired, but they didn't lack their usual calm. At the end of the room, Manager Joel held a clipboard, reading the day's sales figures in a monotone voice. 167 transactions. Average processing time of 3 minutes and 24 seconds. Numbers. Always the numbers. Grayson stood there. He no longer felt like Dean, the trainee. He was Grayson Hale, the man who had just seen a piece of his company's soul, resting quietly behind a checkout counter. He took a deep breath, and then he stepped forward, in front of everyone, under the dim fluorescent lights. He slowly took off his baseball cap. He unzipped his old jacket. Then he took off the faded hoodie. His face was revealed, not the face of a new trainee, but the face that had once appeared on the cover of Forbes. The face once called the father of Midwest retail. Ryan was stunned. An employee dropped a pen. Joel stood straight up as if he'd been doused with cold water. Grayson looked at everyone. His voice was deep but clear. "I am Grayson Hale, the founder of Maple & Co., and I have been here for the past 3 days. To understand my own company again." The air grew thick. No one dared to breathe loudly. I didn't make an announcement. I didn't send an email, because I didn't want to be prepared for. I wanted to see the truth. He looked around, his eyes resting on each person, each face the system had forgotten. And finally, his gaze landed on Ryan. "You didn't know who I was. You had no reason to try and impress me. But I saw you help Mr. Thomas, help the mother with her child, help the young man counting his coins as if you were born to do it. No cameras, no performance charts, no recognition. And you still did it, day in and day out." Joel took a step forward. His expression was a mix of confusion and tension. "Mr. Hale, sir, I know Ryan's actions were good, but according to procedure, Automatically paying for a customer could be considered a transaction violation. Grayson held up a hand, not loudly, but it was enough to make Joel stop talking. "Joel, right now, I don't need procedure. I need the truth." The entire room was dead silent. Grayson turned back to Ryan. "I know about your father. I know you dropped out of college to support your brother. I know you worked 3 jobs at once and were never late. And I know you once fainted in the stockroom, woke up, drank some water, and kept working." Ryan clenched his fists. He couldn't hide the slight tremor in his eyes. But he didn't cry. He didn't argue. He just stood there, as he always did, quiet and steady. Grayson stepped closer. "What's admirable isn't that you help people. It's that no one ever asked you to help, but you still chose to do what was right. And that you made me realize Maple & Co. might have forgotten something." He pointed to the sign behind the counter. "We serve with heart, not just with goods." Grayson turned back, looking directly at Ryan. "Starting tomorrow, you are no longer a cashier." The whole room held its breath. Joel's eyes widened. "You will be the assistant store manager, with a new salary and full benefits, and more importantly—" Grayson paused for a moment. "I, Grayson Hale, will personally pay for the entire remaining cost of your brother's college education. Whatever his scholarship doesn't cover, Maple & Co. will." At this, Ryan finally looked up. His lips parted. I don't know what to say." Grayson stepped forward and extended his hand. "Then don't say anything. Just keep doing what you've always done." Ryan took his hand, and in that moment, without thunderous applause, without a lavish award ceremony, everyone knew something real had just happened. Something that would make the entire system ask itself, who is really keeping this store from falling apart every day? After Grayson announced that Ryan was the new assistant manager and that he would be sponsoring his brother's college education, the entire room remained silent for one long, collective breath. No one clapped right away. It wasn't because they weren't happy. It was because they were remembering, one by one. Old memories seemed to surface all at once, things that had seemed too small to mention. But now they realized Ryan had been there in so many of their life's most difficult moments, and no one had ever said it out loud. Bill, the veteran stocker, was the first to break the silence. He stepped out from the back, his voice hoarse but clear. "Last year, my wife started dialysis. I thought I'd have to request time off, maybe even quit. But this kid right here, Ryan, quietly switched shifts with me for 4 straight months. Never complained, never told anyone." Bill paused, his eyes turning red. I asked him why he did it. He just said, "Because your wife needs you there, and I can manage." A young cashier named Alyssa stepped forward, trembling slightly. "Last month, my car broke down. I didn't have gas money to get to work. Ryan saw me sitting alone in the parking lot. He didn't ask a lot of questions. He just quietly left $20 under my ashtray, with a note that said, 'Making it here is what matters. Don't worry about it.'" Another stockroom employee chimed in with a small smile. "He gave me his old iPad during the lockdown. Said it was an extra, but I knew it was the one Ryan was still using. It's the only reason my son was able to do his online classes. All eyes turned to Ryan. He looked down, clearly unaccustomed to the admiring gazes. Grayson stood beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You didn't say anything about these things." Ryan replied, his voice soft but firm, "Because I thought helping was normal. It's what you're supposed to do. I didn't think it was special enough to talk about." An older employee gave a sad smile. That's the biggest difference between Ryan and the rest of the world. Now, no one was silent anymore. The stories opened up like a dam had burst. He pushed my cart for me every morning when I was still getting used to my new prosthetic leg. Ryan always brings an extra meal in case one of the delivery drivers is late. He was the only person who asked me, "Are you okay?" the week my mother passed away. Grayson looked at them all, his eyes welling up. A company isn't built with concrete, logos, or ERP software. A company, if it wants to last, must be built on the backs of quiet, kind people like this. He turned to Ryan. "You didn't need to be seen to be valuable, but today you are seen, and you deserve it." Ryan still had his head bowed. His eyes were wet. But when he looked up, he wasn't crying. He just smiled. A small smile, enough to put the whole room at ease. In that moment, everyone seemed to be drawn closer together. There was no more supervisor-subordinate, no more work hours off hours. There was only one truth. Some people quietly build the spirit of an entire organization, not with a title, but with their heart. After that evening, no one at store number 17 went to bed early. The news of Ryan's promotion to assistant manager and the CEO sponsoring his brother's entire tuition spread through the internal group chat. An employee recorded the handshake between Grayson and Ryan and posted it on the internal company forum within an hour. It had over 400 shares throughout the Maple & Company system. But Grayson didn't care about the shares. What he cared about was the next step. The next morning, he was at the corporate headquarters, but he didn't go into the boardroom. He didn't open the payroll system. He didn't look at a single revenue chart. He sat alone in his office, writing a simple plan by hand. No KPIs, no deadlines, no bonus multipliers. The plan's name, the Quiet Hero Fund. 2 days later, Grayson returned to store number 17, this time not in disguise. He wore a white dress shirt, his CEO name tag clipped to his pocket. But when he entered, he didn't go straight to the office. He stopped by the checkout counter, where Ryan was helping an elderly woman find the right coupon. Grayson waited. He didn't interrupt. He just observed. Only when Ryan was free did he speak. "Do you have a few minutes in the small meeting room in the back?" Grayson placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a new name tag, Ryan Cooper, Assistant Store Manager, engraved in metal, not plastic. Ryan took it with both hands, his eyes filled with a strange wonder. "I'm not sure I'm worthy enough yet." Grayson shook his head. "It's precisely because you don't think you're worthy that you are the one who is." He took out another document, the founding draft of the Quiet Hero Fund. We are going to start piloting this fund right here at store number 17. It's not to reward the best salesperson. It's to support employees who have chosen kindness as a way of life, even when no one asked them to. Ryan's eyes widened. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. Grayson nodded. If you've had to sacrifice to help others, now it's the company's turn to help you and people like you. This fund will provide emergency financial assistance, internal scholarships, health support grants, or anything a good employee might need but doesn't know where to ask for. Ryan still said nothing, but in his eyes, something had melted. A long-held belief, kept private, had now been given a place to stand. Suddenly, Bill walked in, his hands still dusty with tape residue, his voice hoarse. "I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't interrupt, but I wanted to say something." Grayson nodded. Bill looked at Ryan. Since the day Ryan was appointed, something has changed, not just in him, but in all of us. I see employees asking after each other more. The younger ones are proactively swapping shifts for those with small children. People are voluntarily helping each other without being told. For the first time, I feel like that slogan on the wall, "Serve with heart," is real. Grayson turned back to Ryan. We can write policies, but it's people like you who inspire others to believe that living with kindness is the right thing to do. Before leaving, he said something that Ryan would never forget. This fund isn't to honor you. It's to ensure that other Ryans in the future are not forgotten like you once were. A week passed since the day Ryan Cooper was appointed assistant manager. On the surface, Maple & Co. Store number 17 looked no different. The sign was still faded from the long winter. The door still chimed when customers entered, and the smell of morning coffee still wafted between the aisles. But if you looked closely, you would see something had changed. Now, when Ryan walked in each morning, he was no longer alone doing the shift paperwork. A young employee volunteered to come in early to help with stocking. Alyssa, the cashier Ryan had once helped, was now the one proactively asking, "Are you tired? Want to swap for the afternoon shift?" Bill, the once quiet veteran, now occasionally made coffee for the whole team. One day, he even brought in 2 boxes of day-old donuts wrapped in newspaper and set them on the break room table. I know Ryan likes to share food. Today, it's my turn. No internal newsletter gave the command. There was no kindness competition leaderboard. No one stood up and chanted slogans. It was just small acts being done with a bigger heart. In a little noticed corner, Manager Joel, the man who once reacted robotically to any action not in line with procedure, now quietly observed Ryan more often. One afternoon, he stood by the register and saw Ryan bend down to help an old woman pick up her dropped purse. Then say gently, "It's okay, ma'am. It's just a purse. Nothing to be embarrassed about." Joel said nothing, just nodded, and for the first time in his 5 years as a manager, he walked over and asked a new employee, "Have you had lunch yet?" Change began like that, not from a boardroom, but from an unrecorded act. On the wall near the exit, a new sign appeared. No golden frame, no raised letters, just simple black text on a white background. Be the reason someone believes in people again. No one took a picture of the sign to post online, but customers stopped to look. Employees touched it as if making a silent promise. One rainy afternoon, Ryan saw a little girl standing under the awning, the back of her shirt soaked, waiting for her mother to finish shopping inside. He went to the stockroom, got an old raincoat he kept there, and gave it to the girl to wear. He didn't ask for her name. He didn't ask for it back. A stockroom employee saw this and quietly took off his own grey hoodie and hung it on a hook. For someone who needs it more, no one said a word, but everyone understood the culture had begun to spread on its own. When you plant a seed of kindness, you never know when it will sprout. But when you live with enough sincerity, you don't need a big sign to inspire others. You just have to do, and then others will see. 2 weeks after Grayson Hale removed his disguise and shook Ryan's hand in front of all the employees, store number 17 continued to welcome customers just like any other day. There were no banners, no promotional videos, no emails from the executive board. Only one thing had changed, and perhaps it was the most important thing of all. People began to see each other differently. Employees no longer just clocked in and counted their bonus dollars. They started to look into the eyes of the person next to them, asking, "Are you okay?" Offering, "Let me get that for you." Placing a hand on someone's shoulder, not out of duty, but out of feeling. At Ohio State University, Adam Cooper Ryan's younger brother opened his online tuition portal and saw the words "Tuition balance, $0 paid in full." Adam froze. Then he sent his brother a single text. "Did you do something crazy?" Ryan just sent back a single emoji. Adam didn't need anything more, because he knew from the time they were little, his brother had always quietly chosen to do the right thing even when no one asked. At Maple and County headquarters, Grayson began every executive meeting with a new ritual. "Before we talk about the numbers, tell me a story." From then on, regional directors began reporting not just on sales figures, but on small, previously unrecorded acts. An employee who stopped his car in a snowstorm to push an old woman's car out of the mud. A cashier who delivered medicine to an elderly customer after her shift because the customer had forgotten her wallet. A janitor who stayed to comfort a crying child in the store so its mother could finish her bargain hunting in peace. A new internal newsletter was born. Its name was The Quiet Report. Each newsletter ended with the same line. "Sometimes, the person who changes the entire company doesn't sit in the corner office. They stand quietly behind a counter, doing the right thing when no one is watching." And at store number 17, Ryan still started every shift the same way. Still wore his name tag, still stocked the shelves, still smiled and asked Jenna, "Is little Lily's cough any better, Mr. Green? How's that knee this week?" Only one thing was different now. People paused and looked at him a little longer, not out of admiration, but out of knowing. This is the person who made us believe in kindness again, not with words, but with actions. The small sign hanging by the door, with its white text on a black background, Had someone stop and read it every day. Be the reason someone believes in people again, in honor of Ryan Cooper. And maybe someone today will read those words and quietly ask themselves, could I be the one to do the next kind thing without needing praise, without needing anything in return, just because it's right? If you ever see someone drowning while they're still forced to smile, be the one to throw them a rope, even if you're not a lifeguard, because sometimes the smallest act leaves the biggest legacy. Ryan didn't want the spotlight, but the spotlight found him. And thanks to him, an entire system learned how to be human again.